those, I'd encourage you to visit the Brickworks Building Products website, where you can find a list of all the upcoming events and the topics. And we hope that we can have you join us if those topics are of interest. We're also keeping all of that content that we generate through speaker series events and DIY videos on our YouTube channel. And I think we've got a few ideas in the works for how we can create some new, really interesting content for building designers. So again, I'd encourage you to register or subscribe, I should say, to our YouTube channel and to hear more about what we have going on in future. That's all from me. I'm now going to hand over to Tom Howarth in Queensland to give you an update on a product from our state here. Thank you.
Thanks, Eve. I'll just slide in from the right here. So my name's Tom Howarth. I'm the Business Development Manager in Queensland. Today I'll be talking to you about designer concrete masonry. I only have 3 minutes, so we'll get through it fairly quickly. So our designer concrete masonry product offering is manufactured here in Queensland in Gympie. We have a range of finishes and textures available. We have rock face and split face. We have our smooth blocks, and from smooth blocks we can manufacture our honed, polished, aspect honed blocks. We also have GB veneer, and a recent addition is our breeze block product offerings. So because they are modular units, we do have great design flexibility with our architectural masonry product offering. On our left, we have half-height stack bond. On our right, we have our half-height blocks in a banding through a standard height stretcher bond wall. Here we have our half-height blocks again, but they have a protruding alternate course. And on our right, we have our veneer split face soldier bonds with a stretcher course running throughout. Now this is a project in Burden House. Now this is based up in Bowen in North Queensland. And this project used our GB Masonry smooth porcelain blocks with wedge breeze blocks throughout. Now the general building vernacular in Bowen is general grey block with an applied finish with paint, rendered finish. Now this does raise issues with continuous maintenance. So the paint will fade and the render will eventually crack, and then you have moisture issues throughout. So the beauty of a coloured masonry block is it's a complete finish on the face, so no upkeep. Here you can see the wedge breeze blocks used throughout. So this is on the western face, so it allows some light to dabble through and some breeze to dabble through without that severe North Queensland sun coming through. Here we have a project in Fortitude Valley, which is right near our design studio in Brisbane. So this used the wedge breeze blocks again, and this was our first project using breeze blocks or bringing them back. So we did manufacture them back in the 60s and 70s. They went out of fashion, and we dug out some of our old molds and put them back into production. And from here we have 6 new shapes. So here you see that they're with a steel substrate around. So for all building designers based in Queensland, I have my contact details here. So feel free to call me if you have any project or product inquiries. Otherwise, I'll hand it off to our New South Wales BDM, Sarah Langbridge. Thank you.
Thanks, Tom. Just let me share my screen here. So as Tom mentioned, I'm Sarah Langbridge. I'm the Business Development Consultant here in New South Wales. I'm sure that many of you, if you are from the area and surrounds, you would have met myself or Nathan Blackwell in your travels, either in or around our design studio, which is pictured here. If you haven't visited the design studio, I do highly recommend that you visit. It's a fully functioning space that showcases all of our products. Being from New South Wales, I'm going to talk about very quickly in the 3 minutes a local product, barrel bricks, hailing obviously from our barrel factory, which is in the Southern Highlands. A fitting choice, I suppose, for today's speech, because being designers and the highly creative individuals that you are, you'd surely appreciate the timeless premium product that is our barrel products. Pictured here are a few of the offerings in the range. The 76, which is the standard size, here in Capital Red, and my personal favourite, Cemental Silver. The Barrel Satin, which is a gorgeous polished finish, here in the Barrel Blue. There's also the 50s, as its name suggests, is a 50mm height, and the 300s, which is the long, sleek, slimline one there on the right. Also pavers from Barrel, there's two different ranges, the Hamlet and the London, into the two different formats that you see here. The Hamlet is in 3 colours, and there's a larger palette range in the London. I'm going to just flick through a couple of project images here, some residentials. Here is Cemental Silver and Barrel Blue. Beautiful internal feature wall there in Brahman granite. And this one here, making us all wish that it was summer, not freezing here in New South Wales, in Chillingham white. I guess one of the beauties of the Barrel products is the flexibility that they bring to the table. Because being a solid dry pressed brick, you can sort of play around with corbelling, hit and miss patterns, protruding patterns and things like that. A good example here is our Barrack Place project, which is conveniently right across from our studio. In Barrel Brown. Special shapes. So no one does shapes quite like Barrel. Here's a few you can see on the screen on the right there. Definitely not limited to what you see there. Basically at Barrel, we don't just inspire the imagination, we help build it. Good little tagline there. If you can dream it, they will try to do it. As with all our brochures, though, you can download the special shapes brochure from the website, so check that out. A great build example here on the left is the Australian Embassy in Bangkok, just showing what you can do with radials. I think there was 11 different radials used in this project, and that's in Embassy. So basically they wanted to create a silhouette that was reminiscent of Uluru for the Embassy there in Bangkok. This one, the Darling Square project, a huge advocate for all Barrel products, using Barrel Blue in both standard and the satin finish. The satin finish was actually developed for this project specifically, and that's the beautiful polished one that we spoke about earlier. Also in this project was some glazed bricks from our punch bowl factory. Impressively, this project includes a total of over 70 different shapes, including a particularly challenging 45-degree angle. This one is pretty well known. I'm sure that you've all either seen it or heard of it. Another great example using Barrel bricks in Limousine Gold. Again, 22 special shapes, many of them were custom. As you can imagine, look, I could go on all day about Barrel, special shapes, the colours, everything, but you're probably getting sick of the sound of my voice, and I'm probably running dangerously close to overtime. So I will wrap it up there. As I said, Nathan and I and the whole New South Wales team, the national team, we're all here to help anytime. So reach out, and thanks for listening.
Thanks, Sarah. That was fantastic. I very much enjoyed listening to all of that. Just introduce myself. My name is Natasha. I'm the South Australian Business Development Manager. Just give me a second. I'm going to share my screen with you. Okay, so today I'd like to introduce you to a range that everyone, our team in South Australia, can't wait to actually introduce to the market. It's our Fringe brick range. We developed it during the beginning of this year, and it was something that we're seriously looking forward to the Fringe, and we're looking forward to celebrating it, and we're looking forward to introducing all of these bricks to you guys. So in summary, it's an inspirational collection which is collaborative, it's very playful, it's not very curated, it's more about like almost expressing the random nature of really what happens at the Fringe. So we've got 4 separate bricks in there, and let's have a look at them. Okay. Give me 1 second, this doesn't appear to be moving on. just use that. All right, the first one that we're releasing is called Cabaret. Cabaret happens to be our CEO Lindsay's favourite brick. It's very much a sort of a classic tumbled look in there. We've used some charcoal and we've also used some sawdust, a little bit of dry additive to a really beautiful classic South Australian red. We're going to be releasing that in both the tumbled and the non-tumbled look. So just on the bottom side there, you can have a look at the brick without it being tumbled. Okay, the next product that we're going to be releasing is called the Festival. The Festival has these beautiful denim blue tones in there too, along with some very nice sort of chocolatey reds too. And again, we are going to be releasing both the tumbled and the non-tumbled version of the brick. The non-tumbled version will actually cost a little bit less than the tumbled version. And we're also going to be releasing a very sophisticated one called Theatre. Theatre has some mossy green tones in it, also with some nice sort of denim blue shades. Again, we've used a combination of sawdust and some charcoal and dry additives to produce these colours. It's on a biscuity base too. And finally, we also have a product called Street Art. Street Art has got some of the mossy greens, but then also with some nice sort of brown tones in there too. Now, in terms of the format, we're sticking with the 230 by 110 by 76 format, and there are going to be extruded bricks made at Golden Grove, and we hope to be bringing them to the market within the next couple of months. We've already been receiving specifications for them, so we're really quite excited about that. And to everyone in the Building Designers Association that is in South Australia, we're actually offering a CPD presentation. It's the final Thursday of each month for the next 3 months. We've got 3 different CPDs that we can't wait to share with you. Thanks for listening. So that's all from me today.
Thanks, Dash. My name is Matt Hale and I'm one of the BDMs down here in Victoria. For obvious reasons, I will be coming to you from my garage today and not an office. So I'm going to share my screen as well. Up with all the sharing of the screens. Okay, so I'm going to be moving away from specific products just for a minute to talk about Brickworks as a company and what we're doing in terms of sustainability. So sustainability is an important part of our strategy at Brickworks. All employees have the full support of Brickworks to develop new and sustainable products or processes. All of our clay products come with a 100-year warranty, so any carbon's going to be offset throughout the life of the product. The image you see here is an excerpt from our 2019 sustainability report, which is all online if you do want to get into some more detail. Due to time constraints, again, I'm just going to touch on a couple. We had nearly 6% decrease in the usage of both gas and energy. And our gas has actually decreased by 27% since 2006. Which is fairly good going. And as a company, Brickworks has helped raise $3.5 million in 5 years for the Children's Cancer Institute, which we're all very proud of. We're not resting on our laurels though. We have some pretty ambitious targets for 2025 or running up to 2025. One of these has been that in early 2021, there will be an opt-in carbon neutral system for our bricks. So you can specify locally made carbon neutral products. And that leads me rather nicely back to specific star products in that area. So for that, I'll pass over to Nick. Thank you.
Hi everyone, my name is Nick Sexton. Along with Matt Hale, we make up the business development team here in Victoria. So yeah, just a little bit of Daniel Robertson sort of things. It's been around since 1853. It's a tribute to the iconic Hawthorn brick here in Victoria. It's heavily textured, no two bricks look exactly the same. And the colour consists of earthy reds, greys, blacks, browns and tans. And as Matt mentioned, these are carbon neutral. So one thing we always say is collaboration. We do make certain bricks in different factories. Some aren't carbon neutral, some are, but by collaborating we can get the right brick for you. And soon to be, hopefully most of the bricks, project by project, will be carbon neutral. So moving on to new brick. So the solid brick range has been hugely popular for the last 80, 90 years, I'd say. Smooth finish and crisp, crisp clean feel to it. Chapel Red is probably the brick that everyone associates with Victoria. It's everywhere you go down the district of the city, you can just see this beautiful red brick. Recently, we've also launched the Artisan range, blend of greys and slightly creams. This has led to new brick becoming hugely successful with custom-made bricks. One thing we really value ourselves on is being able to build the impossible. So throughout this, we've now brought out, or about to bring out, 230 by 50 mil, 290 by 50 mil bricks, and also pavers as well. And as the rest of the team said, there's one of us in every state. So with all these products, just get in touch, and yeah, we're happy to collaborate with you and yeah, build some amazing projects. And now I think we're over to Darlene in WA.
Thank you, boys. I'm just going to share my screen now. Okay. Okay. All right. So here in WA, we actually produce the Urbanstone product. Urbanstone is a company that has been in the market since 1993, producing premium quality paving modules. It became a member of the Brickworks family, launched in November 2018. And we'll just run through a few of the products that come out of Urbanstone, because there was, I guess, an image attached to Urbanstone and a particular type of market they were in. But over the last couple of years, we've worked really hard to expand that and make that a little bit more attainable for particularly residential projects. So essentially, we had the original commercial range, which is engineered stone, beautiful segmental pavers, high strength premium concrete that is wet cast. With the commercial range, you have the ability to customize colors, and you've got endless formats and accessories available in that range, coming in shot glass, milled or honed finish. Basically looking very much like a terrazzo or a polished concrete finish, but without some of the dramas that come with that, and introducing segmental formats so that you don't have accessibility issues further down the track, lifting those and doing works underneath. So that's probably what Urbanstone primarily has been known for. And I'll just roll through a few different options that people are probably not as aware of in the Urbanstone range. So we have the beautiful natural stone products. These are actual stones that are sourced from Australian quarries. It's refined and crafted natural stone, coming in exfoliated, honed or polished finishes. Again, you can have customized formats, and a really versatile option, again, creating that stone finish, natural stone finish, but in a segmental item. And when we talk about the endless array of formats and accessories and items available in the commercial range, this is just a little snapshot that kind of tells the story. You have the natural stone curbing, we have bollards, stair treads, bullnoses. Basically, with Urban, customize anything you can dream of in a landscape environment, we're able to create. Obviously, with that came a price point that maybe put Urbanstone a little bit outside of the residential market. So we've done a lot of work reviewing the ranges and making some things, as I said, more accessible to that market. So we have now the residential range, also in engineered stone, using precision engineering techniques, the same as in the commercial range. The difference here is that these are limited to 6 stylish colours and exfoliated, honed or polished finishes. And they only come in the standard sizes that I've listed there, you can see on the screen, 300 by 200, 400 by 400 and 600 by 400, all at 40 mil thickness for pedestrian access. Something really exciting added to that range in residential is the porcelain tile range, paver range. So these are imported rectified porcelain stone pavers, which come in 4 finishes and 2 different formats. So we have the textured finish in the Percorsi Extra, the quartz, which is has a little shimmer sparkle to it with a quartzite finish, the contemporary smart tiles, and also the Soul, which is a wood grain finish, which comes in a different format, a 1200 by 300 board format. And these are for both internal and external applications. And I would say, from my point of view, one of the most exciting items we have at the moment. Often forgotten also within the urban stone range are the stone claddings. So we have a couple of different options there. We have an authentic natural stone stacked stone, which is an elemental stacked form, a very, very slimline structured stone cladding. And then, as you can see in the image here, random stone, which has that more earthy craftsman style finish. Being in Western Australia, we have large deposits of natural limestone. So we also supply blocks, largely to the residential and landscape market. So we have both local Moore River limestone and Karabuda stone, all from different quarries in WA. There is also an engineered stone block option, which is quite popular again in the developer and resi markets. And these come in a variety of sizes for both building and landscape applications. So that's a really brief overview. If you do have any questions, I am in WA. We have a studio at 67 King Street in Perth, but flick me an email if you have any questions. I'm happy to help you out further.
Well, thank you, Darlene. And I think thank you to the rest of our team. Hopefully that's given you an indication of the depth of our range at Brickworks. I'm going to ask our BDM team to share their contacts with everyone online today, along with the state they're based in via the chat function. And that will give you a way of getting in touch if there's any particular products mentioned today that you'd like to hear more about. But also we're interested in just knowing a bit more about you. So BDAA has been kind enough to generate a poll today. And I think we'll have Sarah Jane share that poll just to give us an indication of where you're based and where you're joining us from. So please vote, and thank you again for your attention.
Thanks, Eve. Just while everyone's voting in that poll. That's great. We've had a trip around Australia. Thank you. It's really interesting to know some of the local products that come from each region, and I'm assuming that they're all available through all of the Brickworks studios.
Certainly are, Jen.
Right, are there any other questions for Eve in the Brickworks group? So remember, you can use the Q&A box, or you can also raise your hand if you want to ask a question directly. Okay, so maybe Eve, if you can stay online, just if there are any questions that are coming through, we might move on. Our next presentation is from Keystone Lawyers, who are our new professional partner. We've got Director Lou Stovanovsky and Michael Tuck, who heads to answer some questions. So the topic of discussion today is public liability and the liability being carried by designers and how to limit our liability. So welcome to Lou and Michael. Are you there with us?
Hello there, Jennifer. It's Lou.
Hello,
here.
how are you?
Very well, thank you. And thanks for having us.
No, nice to have you with us. I'm going to hand over to you.
Thank you very much. As Jennifer mentioned, we are a firm of lawyers that specialise in the construction and engineering industry. So some of the things that we work on or have worked on in the past relate to projects in Perth with the Forestfield Airport, advising on items where the building code was needed to be advised upon in Katherine in Northern Territory, and also Brisbane Cross River Rail and various projects across Sydney and Victoria. So our firm is broken up into essentially 3 groups. The first group is the property and development group that does all the buying, selling, subdividing. We then have our commercial group. The commercial group does all of the advice work, all the advisory work, all the contracts and changes to contracts that people like, the tenders. And then we have our litigation team. That often happens in construction. People have disputes and issues about variations, so we advise on those as well. So if you do have any questions, I'm more than happy to answer them. Michael Tuck, who's an associate with our firm, is online and via the chat function. I'll have to apologise up front. I don't have any pretty pictures, so for the presentation today, it'll be just myself online. I'll try and make it as insightful and entertaining as possible. But it's a topic today that is, I guess, very close to my heart, because a lot of the times when members of the BDAA come to us, they often ask for how do I protect my liability without really understanding the notion of liability and how it arises. So today, what I wanted to do is spend, I guess, 10, 15 minutes just going through how does liability get imposed upon us, and what types of liability, and then how can we actually limit that liability? Is it possible? How do we do that? And how long does that liability last without those contractual exclusions? So we're going to talk about, I guess, protection mechanisms, and with the contracts that we enter into, our insurers will also appreciate that if we have had our contracts vetted, and then the contract has the proper protections, then when we obtain and obtain our professional indemnity insurance, which is all very important, and I know that there's been a spike in the actual premiums for professional indemnity, that we have at least all the protection mechanisms that we can have from a contractual perspective to help reduce that liability and essentially protect our businesses. That's what that's all about. So what is this notion of liability? And this is a topic that I talk about quite a lot in various seminars around Australia. So liability in respect of everything that we do is imposed by three things. It can be imposed by contract terms. So when we look at our contract, we have express terms in our contract, something that's actually in the actual terms of the contract. And then there are terms that are implied by law, and they are terms that the judges over the common law has said that it is reasonable to infer that these terms actually apply in our contracts. And I'll go through that. And then there are others that are implied by statute. So there are going to be, or has started, changes, particularly in New South Wales, in relation to the liability of designers that are involved in projects that have now a new statute that imposes a tortious liability. That is, there is a term in the contract that says that it is assumed that every single design is in accordance with the relevant building code. So they're the type of statute type provisions. Then there is tort. So tort is duty of care and negligence. And then there is the third element, which is representations and misrepresentation. So we'll look at all those three, and we'll just discuss what they actually mean before we go into how do we actually control and limit that liability. So the contract obviously determines what is our scope of works, and it's very important from indeed a lawyer's perspective to look at ideally a contract that the parties have entered into, and that there is a defined scope of services. Where the greyness can come in is that there is no clarity around what we were actually asked to do and to perform in respect of those services. So I guess one of the things that we do need to look at is what is the scope? What are we actually going to deliver? And what we do need is proper and express terms in our contract. One of the examples that I do give in respect of this is we've had a case in the past where we've had one of our engineers who had a claim made against them for defective design works in relation to footings and a slab internally of a warehouse. What transpired is that the use for that warehouse had changed with a new owner coming in, and it was the new owner that made the claim against our design engineer. And the design engineer was able to produce documents that said our design was for this particular purpose, which was for a warehouse housing. It was furniture that people were moving house, so the furniture was housed in there in boxes, in crates, but the new use was more robust. It actually had brick works, bricks actually stored internally, and the actual use then changed. So it caused some failure in the slab and the footings because of the, I guess, the heavy nature of the movement of the pallets that were being moved inside that warehouse. So we're able to reasonably defend that position on the contract because our client very easily was able to produce to us the specific purpose for what they were designing for, and that claim went away very easily. So there are, I guess, the takeaway from here is have your terms and conditions, but also the scope of services that you're intending to deliver is properly documented. So you have a box around the intended delivery of the services. So the way in which contracts are interpreted is we look at if there is a breach, what is the breach of that term? But it then transpires further into this liability under tort. And there is some leading cases about what is the intended duty of care that we have as designers. And there is a case, very well-known case from many years ago called Volley and Inglewood Shire Council that says, is the duty reasonably foreseeable and that person would have been injured or damage caused because of the design that I did. And so that's where the courts looks at. If there's no contractual relationship between party A and party B, but party C determines to sue in a certain circumstance, the court looks at, well, what is it reasonably foreseeable for that? Was it at the time that the contract was entered into reasonably foreseeable for that party to have been contemplated to be injured? So there is the footing case that we discussed, and that was it reasonably foreseeable that the use would change with a new owner. But where you have, let's say, a design of a wall, and that wall is very close to the neighbours and it includes construction or footings, it's reasonably foreseeable that if those footings or shoring isn't effective, then the building next door may suffer some damage. So that's a reasonably foreseeable damage that could occur. And in that instance, the neighbour next door who is damaged could make a claim against the designer for failure to take into account those that damage. So that's contract and tort. So as we often say is be very detailed in your scope of services. What is the purpose that your design is going to be fit for? Again, think of that fit for purpose test because that's what's going to be looked at by a judge to say, well, what was the actual scope and the design going to be fit for? Then the test is, well, it's that reasonable person test. So we as design engineers, we will be tested against our specific cohort. So if it's a design of a footing that is defective, then in an expert conclave and then further litigation, the test is that if one engineer was going to design a footing one way, would another engineer design it the same way based on the same information? So it's that reasonable person test that we need to look at. And that's why in a lot of court cases, we have two experts that compete with various opinions about whether party A, who designed a particular element that failed, party B will say, well, because of these reasons, at the time it should have been designed differently. So it's that reasonable person test that we're going to be attested to, and the test comes in the court of law when people are being cross-examined in the witness box. Then there are terms that are inferred or implied by law in our contracts. And in every single service contract that we have, so regardless of whether we have any terms and conditions, it might be a shake hand deal, that the term is the services will be rendered with reasonable care. And that's something that the courts have said right around Australia, that's an implied term, because that term satisfies the elements that the courts have said is reasonable to imply into all contracts between, let's say, a client, customer, and the person that's delivering the service. So it gives business efficacy, goes without saying, it's reasonable, it doesn't contradict any other term, and it's capable of clear expression. So that services will be rendered with reasonable care. You'll find that also then written into contracts more often these days as well. The other one, I indicated that we have terms express, terms that are implied by law and terms that are implied by statute. So here in Australia, we have the Competition and Consumer Act. It did away with the old Trade Practices Act, and now in the Competition and Consumer Act, there are implied guarantees into contracts, and particularly contracts that are for consumers, and that is for work that is $40,000 or under. And those terms, those guarantees are in every single transaction that we have with a consumer. And that is that the services will be done with due care and skill, and that the services will be fit for their intended purpose. So they are guarantees in all our contracts for contracts that we have with consumers. So they're the type of statutory terms that are applicable into everything that we do. We spoke briefly about negligence. So we have contract, then we have negligence. Negligence is that neighbour that can sue for damage because it was reasonably foreseeable that the relationship was there. It's proximate, and it's reasonable to assume that if we don't design our building correctly, that it's possible the next door neighbour may suffer some damage. So that's liability in tort, again tested on that reasonable person test. The other aspect is, and it's a minor aspect, but something that is going, I guess, more and more into including misrepresentation in pleadings against parties where there is an agreed party. So misrepresentation is a representation that we as designers might make, whether it's oral, in writing, that the other party relies upon to act upon and engage our services. For example, I've just got a crude example of, I'll design this storage shed for you, but it will still pass council requirements for a residential cottage. If you say those type of words and someone goes ahead and engages you, but in fact that turns out to be a misrepresentation, that's also a claim that can be made against you, and that's also professional liability there and then. So they're the type of terms, and I just wanted to highlight, how does liability become imposed upon us? And then I wanted to move on to liability and when does it end. But before I move onto liability, how it ends, and then briefly look at how do we actually limit our liability, I've just got a poll question that I'd like to ask. And the poll question is, do you have your own terms and conditions? Are your terms and conditions current? Do your terms and conditions offer the best protection in your view? So it'd be great if you could answer that so I can get an understanding of how many of us have their own robust terms and conditions that can offer the protection that we seek. I'll go on and I'll look at when does our liability end. Under contract, our liability ends 6 years from breach of a term in the contract. So it's a fairly lengthy period of time. So we enter into a contract today and we design something, we get paid along the way. If we do anything that represents a term that is that we are in breach of, it's 6 years from breach of that term. So the best way to look at it is if I sign today, our liability starts from today for 6 years. Under negligence though, it can be longer. So it's 6 years from when the negligent act is discovered. And quite often we have lots of cases where some of our clients come to us with a potential claim and says, I designed this work 4 years ago, and now that the owner, or it might be a strata scheme, is coming to us and to say that we have had this claim now, but it's 4 years since I did the work. Well, for that, if it's negligence and we fail to, let's say, design the waterproofing elements properly, our liability starts at the time that negligent act is discovered. So let's say if there is water leak inside the building, once that becomes known, it's 6 years from the time that water leak becomes known, and that's when our liability ends, 6 years after that time. In respect of consumer guarantees, it's 3 years from when you become aware of that guarantee not being complied with. That is, that we haven't performed our services with due and proper skill and care. And for misleading, deceptive conduct, so where we say or write things that aren't true, that the other party relies upon, it's 6 years from when that cause of action arises, and that is when that party relied upon that representation, but then subsequently suffered loss because it was wrong. So there can be fairly lengthy periods under our statute of limitations before a claim is made, which is the very reason why we need to keep our professional indemnity insurance maintained. So in terms of how do we actually limit our liability, this is all, I guess, where the protection that we can give all comes about, because there has been some case law recently, more particularly in New South Wales, but adopted in Victoria as well, and other states have adopted the New South Wales approach, is that when we're delivering professional services, be it designers, architects, engineers, we have the ability to put into our terms and conditions certain clauses that limit the liability. And so the contractual limitation of liability says I can limit my liability in a term in the contract to, let's say it's $1,000 at the maximum, and that liability ends 6 months after I finish performing that work. Now, if you have a clear and express provision in your agreement that that's what it says, then the courts have upheld that and said, well, in terms of breach of contract, in terms of negligence, and in terms of statute, then the intention was to limit your liability for that period of time and for that monetary sum. And if it's written in a way that is clear and unambiguous, it will be upheld by the courts. So that's another key takeaway from today's presentation is if you don't have these type of provisions in your agreement to limit liability, it certainly is advisable to do so, because one, it will be seen in great light with your insurer, your professional indemnity insurer, but also it gives you that protection. It certainly is a shield to protect your business, your company, in the work that you do. Have the limitation of liability provision, have a disclaimer for consequential loss, which means we don't get hit for losses that are unknown, and things that are loss of profit that could be made against us because there's been a delay in, let's say, handing over of could be a retail shopping centre, and the other side are seeking compensation for delay. The other thing that limitations of liability do as well is limit liability in the contract overall. So if there is delay to the project, then you can limit your liability for delay damages and liquidated damages or unliquidated damages. So it's very important that we have these type of provisions in there. And again, you can limit your liability for those type of misleading and deceptive conduct type claims that we discussed earlier. So have a limited liability provision, make it clear and unambiguous, combined with an indemnity provision that says we will indemnify the customer for any work that we do that may cause loss, but only to the extent that that loss is caused by our actions. So we need to make sure that our indemnity provision is written well. Again, a provision that our PI insurer will look at and ensure that if we are looking at doing work for the long term, that we continue that professional indemnity insurance, because that insurance we will certainly need going forward, because these type of claims are made on a claims made type basis. So it's the relevant insurer at the time that any claim is made that will pick up any liability claim. So ensure that we have that runoff cover as well. The other aspect I wanted to also mention is that most of the states around Australia have proportionate liability legislation, which means that if there is a contract that we enter into, the proportionate liability legislation means that there may be a number of parties that are liable for any particular failure. And what it means is that that particular person that is aggrieved needs to sue every party that might have some form of liability. Other than Queensland, where the legislation cannot be excluded, every other state, it can be excluded. So I just wanted to highlight that if you see provisions that says the provisions of proportionate liability legislation are excluded from this contract, that you should strike out that provision and allow the legislation to take effect as it was intended. Because what normally happens is that, builder may not be around, the person that in fact is most liable won't pay, and the party that's aggrieved will go for the person with the deepest pockets. And it's normally someone that has the professional indemnity insurance behind them. So have the application of the proportionate liability legislation apply, and don't enter into contracts where it's excluded. So that's the run through of liability. As I said, the takeaways are clear and unambiguous terms of limiting liability. Your contract scope must be very clear, define what you're going to do and for the purpose that it's going to be for, and ensure that your indemnity provision is written so it aligns with your limited liability provision as well. And we can certainly help with all of that. We have already drafted some terms and conditions for members that already have them, but we've updated them because law does change. We need to make sure that we've got the latest version, and once they're done, you can use them with confidence going forward. So thank you very much for your time today.
Thank you very much, Lou. There's a lot of information in there to digest. I think Sarah Jane is going to send a link out to a recording of this webinar so we can re-listen to it and absorb some of that. There's a couple of questions coming in. I might just get you to stay online if you're happy to, Lou.
Yeah, sure. Yep.
Michael, just to keep answering them. And I'll wrap up this formal part of the meeting. So we'll put a QR code up on the screen shortly as well. point. There it is. So the next meeting is on the 4th of August at 1 p.m. So we look forward to seeing you all again then, and there'll be an email coming through for registration as there was for this meeting. So who's going to stay online? Keep sending through any questions that you have. Very much for joining us, and thank you to Brickworks and Keystone Lawyers. You all got a lot out of that meeting, and we will look forward to seeing you at the next meeting. Okay, bye for now.